will say I was just a little bitter when someone says I can't camp in like perfectly good forested land. So the whole day as we were like hiking there, I'd be like, I could camp there. There's 350 campsites that I could see right here. An army could camp there. Everything's so good for camping. But then it is true that when I got to the campground, I was like, this is kind of nice.
And
Hi, I'm Carrie.
And I'm Molly.
And you're listening to the
Two Sisters on Adventures podcast.
Since we last put out a podcast, we've been pretty busy.
Because we went to Oregon and Washington, and then came to North Dakota,
and then Oregon and Washington,
and then we were farming, and then we went to California, and then Oregon and Utah.
I told Molly I actually don't want to calculate how many hours we spent driving together in a car this summer. I feel like it'd probably be like 300. So anyway, we've been a little busy.
Yeah,
but we're back, and we are. I know that I put a poll on, and people said they wanted to hear about the North Cascades. But then instead of recording that, we went and did another trail, and that's most fresh in our minds right now. So we're actually going to just talk about the Tahoe Rim Trail.
Yeah.
So I thought that we'd talk a little bit about why we selected the Tahoe Rim Trail. Molly?
Yeah, so we didn't hit more than, I think, 4 days for a backpacking trip this summer, but we wanted to do just a little bit longer.
Yep.
And did I create an itinerary in the North Cascades back in March? That was an 8-day itinerary, including summiting a few peaks, like dry camping, long days, really short days, bushwhacking, cinnamon rolls and Stehekin.
Yeah.
I did make that, and then
it was on fire.
Well, the closer I got to it, the more I was like, wow, this is a ridiculous itinerary that I made in March, which explains why I was crazy. Because I was crazy at the time.
Yeah, well, because you wanted to be outside.
Yeah. And so, the sourdough fire in the North Cascades, it shut down our trailhead, and it would have been really smoky anyway, so we didn't do that. But we still wanted to do.
We did plenty of fun stuff, and we spent time outside. Totally. But after we came back, we were kind of like, well, we're gonna keep our eye out for a weather window on the West Coast that coincides with a bad weather window in North Dakota, so we can't harvest.
Yeah.
And if we see one of those, we're just gonna pop on out and do like a nice 80-mile backpacking trip.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And we kind of had a hierarchy. Like, we had a couple spots we were watching in Washington, Idaho, Utah, Colorado was a backup plan. And we didn't have anything in California.
And California was not even slightly on our radar. But the day came when it became clear that we weren't going to harvest for a little bit, and so we had some time off. And when we looked at the weather, though, unfortunately on the West Coast, it also was bad weather.
Oh my gosh, it was horrible in Washington.
Plan A was out.
Bad in Idaho.
Plan B was out.
Utah, weather was weird, and then also we needed a ride, and that was just like not gonna materialize.
Plan C was out.
Okay. Colorado, we had found a 30-mile trail.
Yeah.
We were like
we were looking for something like 60 to 80.
And then, Carrie, how did it even pop into your mind?
I was just like looking at the forecast, and there was one place in the world, one place in the U.S. that looked like it wasn't going to have bad weather, and that was Lake Tahoe. And I'd heard of the Tahoe Rim Trail before. I didn't know really anything about it, except I knew it went around Lake Tahoe, which one could figure out from the name, Tahoe Rim Trail. And I was like, well, this seems like it's it. And so we kind of did some research on it. I mean, this was a one-day decision, where like we were gonna leave basically the next day.
Yeah.
We had like an event that we had to be around for, and then we were gonna leave on like right at Sunday morning. And so we just we had Friday as our prep day, and we had to look through so many different things. We were like, oh, I think that there's like some dry sections, so we have to try and figure out what we're gonna do. Like, are there water carries? Where's there water? And I ended up getting the far out guide for it because I was like, well, I can't plan something in one day that's 170 miles and also save money on the far out app.
At the time, we thought it was only 160 miles.
Which was why it made sense, because we also had a wedding we were going to stop at in Utah on the way home, and that was going to be what basically we had
a chunk of like 10 days to hike the trail.
10 days to hike the trail. So we were like 16 miles a day. We can do that. That shouldn't be an issue. And I mean, if you fall behind on a couple days on a 16 mile a day trip, then you can have a couple big days to catch up,
Exactly.
But we were
kind of happy because we hadn't really restocked any of our hiking food yet, but we actually finally dehydrated a meal.
Yeah.
Maybe like 2 weeks prior. So Carrie found this recipe for a soup. It's like a spicy chicken soup.
Yep.
So, we made it up in this big pot where we had to simmer it. You're supposed to simmer it for, I think, 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And there was still, I glopped a little bit onto our dehydrator and it was still there was so much liquid.
Yeah.
So I think we simmered it for like 3 hours until a lot of the liquid had gone away, and then we, I think, dehydrated it for 8 hours.
About 8 hours. That. People really thought it looked like vomit, so that was nice.
The crazy thing is, we did not try the soup when we made it, and then after we dehydrated it, we also did not try the soup because I'm like, I don't know. There's nothing worse than trying something that should be on a trail in your home, in the comfort of your own home, when you're not hungry, you're not, you could have anything. Freezing cold. Yeah, you can have literally anything. Yeah. Within reason, Carrie. But we didn't try it.
And we've made the mistake of trying dehydrated food in the home before. Backpacker's Pantry, 3 cheese mac and cheese really slaps in the wilderness, but in the personal home, it's like not very good. Honestly. I would not encourage anyone to try it. In a case of an emergency. Yeah. Let the emergency really build to the point where you're starving, and then
that's would be preferable.
But like if it's like, oh, my electricity's been out for 1 day and I want a hot meal, just say boil up some water for ramen. Yeah. Don't be doing that.
So we were like ready with we had 7 meals, and we were like, well, we can stop on an REI on the way. Like we can do this Tahoe Rim Trail.
And Molly and I, when we drive, we're like machines. Like it's surgical. We get out of the car, one washes the windshield, one fills the car with gas, use the bathroom, and drive. Like our stops add nothing. Yeah. So we were like, we can afford to stop at an REI on the way. Because the other thing is, we needed to start the trail by Tuesday to have even a shot at finishing it in the time frame that we needed to finish it.
And then be able to drive 8 hours to the wedding in Utah. Yeah. We were budgeting time very aggressively. The drive to California, we had a big day of driving the first day. Yeah. Made it all the way to Pocatello, Idaho, and then left extremely early in the morning because we had to actually pick up a permit. For the Tahoe Rim Trail, you don't...
It's amazing. You can just get a permit.
Yeah, you just... the only section that requires a permit is the Desolation Wilderness, which is pretty popular. It's extremely beautiful. And normally what you have to do is 7 to 10 days in advance, you just call the ranger station, and they're like, cool, and they email you a permit you print out. For us, because we planned it on a Friday, and we started it 3 or 4 days later.
Originally, we were going to start it on a Monday, but then that's where the story gets better. We didn't leave on that Sunday.
We were just so tired.
Yeah, it was like, okay, it's never going to start a road trip when you're already at a total deficit of sleep. So we started on Monday, which just meant that we had
25 hours of driving
to do the trail.
And started on Tuesday afternoon. Yeah. So we actually had to go to the ranger station to pick up our permit, which... I don't know if we talk about that right now.
Yeah, may as well. Yeah. So we made our drive. We got
I'll go back to Friday one more time. We were like, Tahoe Rim Trail, we can do it. I was like, well, let me just call the ranger station and just see. I call this guy, and he's like, hello, so happy. And I asked if, I could start the trail on Monday, because at that point I was thinking Monday. He said, yeah, just stop in and get a permit. Good for you. And I was like, well... He sure is cheery. I guess we can do it. Yeah. He's not discouraging me from...
Well, the weather looks great, honestly, so what's the problem?
Yeah, exactly. So we made our 25-hour road trip. We got to the ranger station by 2:30, which was great. And then...
Because it closed at 4:30.
Gary had this thought when we walked in there, either we're
I was either this is going to be really fast and you're going to have an employee who's just like, da-da-da-da, let's go. Or it's going to be like the DMV scene in Zootopia where the sloths are working and you're just going to be in there forever. And we walked in, and the person who was helping us, very sweet, very nice, but just it was basically like they said, hello. You know what I mean? Everything was so slow, and Molly had to redo her fire permit because it wasn't printed off. And then when they were, it was single finger typing. You know what I mean? The type of thing where you're just like, okay, so.
But the ranger did know someone from North Dakota. The ranger was like, a fiddler. I was like, great. Yeah. A fiddler. Yeah. We didn't ask who it was. We didn't feel like
we'll probably know them. So
we hadn't budgeted enough time to ask questions.
Because not only were we going to pick up our permit, we were going to start the same day. Yes. I don't know if we've said that yet.
Yes.
But we were able to pick up our permit. We stopped at the shores of Lake Tahoe because I said we need to at least like touch Lake Tahoe.
I'd never seen Tahoe before.
I'd never been there either.
It was so beautiful.
Yeah.
And when we touched it, it was a nice lake, it seemed.
It was very, very pleasant. So we drove from the ranger station up to the trailhead. We had decided to start at the Spooner Summit Trailhead, which is on the east side of Lake Tahoe on the Nevada side, because that is the middle of one of the driest stretches on trail. And so that way we could start and have water and carry extra water to our campsite that night, because then we wouldn't have to, worry about getting water when we're at that area.
If you're hiking the trail, you can go off trail a total of, I don't know if it's 1 or 2 miles to get water at Spooner Lake. However, we didn't want to do that because
we had found out as we were driving that the trail is actually 175 miles long. Even though the association does say it's 165 miles long, it's definitely minimum 175 miles. So we were like, I know it doesn't sound like that much to add 15 miles to a trail, but it is more when you have to add 1.5 miles each day.
Oh, yeah.
And when you're starting with a half day, so you're only going to make it like 9 or so miles, it kind of adds a little more to the day.
So we basically made a commitment that we were never going to get off the trail for any water ever. So we were either going to do some pretty big water carries. Well, that was pretty much our option.
Or we were going to die
not do the trail.
We're not going to get water even if we're dying.
Oh, gosh.
No, but it was funny as we drove up to that trailhead because I guess I hadn't braided my hair, so I was like, oh goodness, I gotta get my hair all braided. And then I'm pouring. We started eating trail pizzas this year instead of eating tuna.
Oh.
You know what? Tuna I will always respect.
It serves a role,
and it is necessary for long distance backpacking. But a trail pizza, we just our friends actually tried it on one of the trails we did with them this summer. And after I saw that they didn't die from eating unrefrigerated cheese after 2 days, I was like, sweet, I guess I'm gonna start doing that now too.
And it's funny because we've definitely seen lots of people who bring cheese with them.
Yeah.
And when the cheese gets so
soft,
if it's a small slice,
if it's 85 degrees, I'm probably not gonna
do this. And the cheese is super squishy, it's one thing. But then when you're putting somewhat warm cheese onto a trail pizza anyways, then it feels okay.
It's probably fine.
And honestly, the temperature was cool enough on this entire hike. Our cheese never really warmed, but like Carrie said, we have gotten into trail pizzas, and
which is just a tortilla with some pizza sauce and some Baby Bell cheese.
And
we don't heat it up or anything.
We might put
just
pepperoni.
Eat it.
I know. Someone was like, "Oh, you could make a great trail pizza, heat it up over a stove."
We're like, nope, it's just our turkey pepperoni that's from a bag.
We wrap it up in a tortilla and we eat it, but it's so good. And then we even rekindled our passion for chocolate
Teddy Grahams as
again.
A side.
Oh my gosh.
So it was actually, there were some quite delicious lunches.
So you were braiding your hair.
Yeah, okay, so I was braiding my hair as we drove up there. It's just funny because it's what's in my memory. I'm also trying to pour over sauce into these little bags because I don't want the sauce to be sitting out of the container for days and days at a time. So it's just a very chaotic drive up there.
Yeah.
And also trying to take in the beauty of Tahoe, I guess.
We got to Spooner Summit at, I think it was 3:30 probably. And then we had
to rearrange our car and change our outfits.
And we hadn't even, we'd mostly packed our packs, but there were still parts of it that we needed to pack. And Carrie and I did a mountaineering course this year in Washington, and we didn't know what a soft shell was beforehand. And
I don't think anyone knows what a soft shell is.
Yeah, I went to REI and was like, show me the soft shells.
And they're like, here's some rain
jackets. And the
jackets.
guy is like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm covering this for a coworker. I don't know what that is. And then it turns out they sell 2 soft shells at REI. But we loved wearing a soft shell for climbing. Yeah. So I had to make a last minute decision if I would bring my soft shell or not.
And I didn't bring mine.
I decided no, and then it was windy that day.
Regretted it.
Yeah, and then I don't think I regretted it.
And then didn't regret it again.
Exactly.
So yeah, that was finally the
soft shell. So we were shoving stuff in the pack,
making decisions,
trying.
And
to
then
decide.
I was thinking, okay, I'm in Lake Tahoe. You're not really supposed to have a ton of food visible in your car because the bears are around. So then I'm trying to find anything that is food or even could look like food to a bear or wrappers and make sure that's shoved under all the seats. And So it's quite a process to get actually out of the car versus get ready for the trail.
Meanwhile, the trailhead is pretty, like, there's quite a few people using it. There's some mountain bikers.
There was like a whole class of kids. It must be some sort of an outdoor exercise thing in California or Nevada, because they were like doing high knees on the trail. There's like 20 of them.
Yeah, we're just shoving stuff in our packs and under seats in the car. Yeah. Getting ready to
changing.
Hit the trail.
Yeah.
And then those like moments when you're like, oh, I'm gonna sit on a toilet for the last time.
Yeah.
However, this trail is like a little bit more developed, where you don't have to be quite as wildernessy the whole time. So I think it was about 4:30 p.m. and the sun was gonna set around 6:50 or so, something like that. So we had a couple hours of daylight, and we were hoping to make it about 9.5 miles to Marlette Lake for our campground.
And we had to start out carrying extra water because Marlette Lake campground actually doesn't have any water. There's usually like a hand pump, but it was broken this year. So we knew that there wasn't going to be any water in like the first 20 miles, right?
Yeah.
And actually at mile 20, it was just a possibility of there being water, but not a for sure thing. Because Twin Lakes typically dries up in like June, but because of their high snow year this past year, people were saying it still had water in it, but it wasn't really clear if there was going to still be water at the time that we got there, because the last comment was from like a week ago.
Yeah, so we had 10 liters of water total, so 6 extra liters, but basically 5 liters per person.
Yep.
And then one little thing that we did, because we could, is we brought some Subway sandwiches with us for our dinner. So instead of making a dehydrated meal,
eat fresh.
Yeah, we threw some 6-inch subs into a bag. We just knew that
we knew we were gonna hike in the dark, and it's like, okay, I know I don't want to get to camp and then boil water and spend 20 minutes waiting for my food to rehydrate. So we just threw our sandwiches into baggies and threw them into our backpacks. And kind of a funny thing about the Tahoe Rim Trail is it's in such a developed area. So you have to actually cross a lot of roads. You have to cross highways.
Yeah.
And so it was like we get all of our stuff in our packs, and then immediately we're going to have to cross a super busy highway.
It's 4 lanes.
Yeah, it's 4 lanes, and the cars are just flying by, and it's not like there's a crosswalk.
No.
And so I was just thinking, okay, well, I don't actually know how this is going to go, but fortunately there was a break in the cars, and
we walked right up, and then no cars.
Yeah.
We ran across, and then Carrie's like, well, we're never going back.
I was like, well, we're going to go all the way around or something, because I'm not crossing that road again.
We always talk about times on a trail where you feel like you want to turn around, but you've just overcome an obstacle.
Yeah, and you're like, I'm not doing that again.
Like specifically one in the North Cascades, which we'll talk about in the future. There were multiple like checkpoints where we're like, well, we made it across that obstacle or through that challenge, and I'm not gonna try my luck again.
Especially on a loop trail.
So I guess I'm going the rest of the way.
Yep.
So we crossed the highway, and we were like, well, we're not going to do that
again, which was ironic because, we took a couple pictures at the trailhead, and then we were like walking, and I don't know, we were maybe 2 miles in.
Not even.
And we had printed off all of these maps because the Tahoe Rim Trail Association does have some really great maps, and they kind of have some water resource information. And of course, I printed all of these off, and Molly goes, do you have the maps? I was like, do you have the maps? And then we had to decide, well, we're not going to get those maps. So I did go on their website and just screenshot all of their maps.
Water information.
So but we did have that information.
Yeah, we did not turn around because we were not going to encounter the road again. We covered a good amount of ground at a pretty good speed because that's what the amount of sunshine dictated.
Yeah.
But we got up
also,
on
it was a really nice trail to start with.
Yeah, it was
that
really
9
nice.
miles was beautiful.
We made it up on a ridge. It looks like it's near Snow Valley Peak, and it just opened up to this beautiful view of Lake Tahoe, and it was right at sunset. It had been a pretty cloudless day, but then all of a sudden clouds kind of started to roll in along the rim of the lake, and it made for an absolutely beautiful sunset. So it kind of felt like one of those times when you're like in a movie or in an Instagram reel, and you're just walking along and enjoying the colors, and the wind definitely came up, and that's when I wrote in my journal, I was like, I wish I would have brought my soft shell. But it was a little windy, it was cold, but it was a glorious sunset.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Also, I'm just gonna throw in, the soft shell is supposed to like protect you from wind, so that's why when it's windy, we're bummed by not having it.
Wind windbreaker, but it doesn't. I don't know.
I don't think it's waterproof.
Well, it is.
Water
beads
resistant.
up on it. Water resistant.
Okay. Anyway, that's not important. But it was a really beautiful sunset. It was a very chill trail to start with. Yeah. And it's funny because I'm so used to being on trails where you go to like the top of the ridge, because like the Pacific Crest Trail, you know, a lot of the time it follows like the crest. Not all the time though, but it was kind of funny because on the Tahoe Rim Trail, you don't always go to like the top of the ridge. You're just kind of hang out beneath it, which honestly, very convenient when you're just trying to absolutely grind out the miles.
Actually though, yeah.
Because our packs were so heavy. I mean, I remember thinking like, oh my goodness, my shoulders are sore, my back is sore, my hips are sore. Like, what's going to happen if this is how I feel the whole time? And luckily the next day I didn't really feel those specific pains. But it was kind of like definitely a huge adjustment to put that pack on and have all that extra water in there and just start going.
Carrie and I were trying to remember how often we've actually, like, when we've ever done a true night hike.
Yeah.
When we break out our headlamps, usually it's because we're starting early in the morning before the sun comes up. And I can remember at Silver Falls using our headlamps like one time at the end. But in reality, I don't know if we've genuinely done a real night hike.
Yeah.
So the sun, it set and it got to be really quite dark. And we had 2 more miles to go to the campground. So on the headlamps went, and it was kind of nice because we had a fairly full moon. It's weird. We seem to always hike.
We only hike with the full moon.
Full moon. So that gave us a little bit more light, but it was a little different experience. I know some people really love night hiking.
Yeah.
For me, I think I like to see everything that I can see. But we were getting close to the campground.
Yeah, and it was nice because we were just rolling along, and then all of a sudden I saw these glowing eyes just popping out at me. And my first thought was like, it's either a deer or it's a cougar. And I just was so annoyed because I've been hiking. We're almost to the camp. And I think, what did I say out loud? Did I just say, oh, come on, or something like that? Because I was just thinking of,
are you kidding me?
Yeah, are you kidding me? I was just like, it's going to be so annoying to have to deal with this cougar. And we're going to have to like try to scare it off. And then we got to unload our whole camp and like pitch our tent, and a cougar's around and people are gonna be stressed out. And then luckily I shone my light a little bit more on it, and it was clearly just a deer.
I know. And then Carrie still was like, hey deer. I'm like, I don't think you have to do that, but honestly it was a relief.
Never know.
We'll take many deer over any presence of a cougar.
But it was so funny because I feel like we're super used to backcountry camping.
Yeah.
And Tahoe Rim Trail, right? A lot more developed. And we got to our campsite for the night, which another complexity of the Tahoe Rim Trail that we haven't talked about is there are so many zones where you can't camp unless you camp in an official campsite. And this was one of those areas, but it was funny because, I don't know, I think my mentality towards this trail was just different than normal, where I was like, we have to just keep going and go fast. Yeah. And so to show up at a campground, I saw the trailer, I was like, sweet. I told them, like, this is going to save me like 1 hour tonight and probably 2 more hours in the morning because I'm not going to have to dig any cat holes. And then there was like a picnic table so I could sit and have my dinner instead of being on the ground. And the tent pad's already like completely flattened, and there was even a bear locker so you didn't have to.
We brought only enough things that it all fit in our bear can. But all of a sudden when there's a bear locker and you're like, oh, I don't even have to jam everything in there. I can just put it in the locker.
Sweet.
Carrie and I were on cloud 9.
Yeah,
we kept looking at our wonderful little picnic table.
We had our little locker, Subway sandwiches,
a toilet. And we were like, maybe we're campground girls.
I was like, I don't know. Maybe this is me. But I think
definitely
just
not,
in that scenario,
it felt nice to after like. I mean, we got started Pacific time, like we were up at 4 a.m. Pacific time, and it just felt really nice to like be able to sit on a human-made type of chair,
man-made,
and it was nice. Campground girls for the night.
And one thing that I forgot to mention was like, of course, the weather's perfect for Tahoe when we make this plan, but like as we drive out, it gets more and more questionable. Where I was seeing that there could be like 70-mile-an-hour wind gusts in that area, and I thought that could be less than ideal, but it was so nice because I think it kind of calmed down as the evening came along.
Yeah.
And so it was funny because people were coming back down the ridge and they'd be like, oh, there's going to be a lot of wind up there. And then we got up there and it was not that much, which also could just be related to the fact that we're from North Dakota where wind is always blasting.
He was like, oh, hurricane force winds up there. And by the time we were on the ridge, honestly, it was like a breeze.
It was like a mid-level breeze.
It was weird because the first couple nights on the trail, it was like, it would be still at night. And then in the middle of the night, there'd be like the 2 a.m. wind gust and the 4 a.m. wind gust. And even though the tent is very sturdy, it's still like a little scary when your tent is just like flap, 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 flap. So that happened a couple times that night.
Well, and also we went on another trail this summer where our tent almost blew away.
Oh, so it basically did blow away. Yeah. Which we'll circle back around to that later too.
So that was kind of like a stressful.
Okay. I was wondering like why is that never
so
been
worried about it?
Stress for me, but it's because our we almost lost our tent to a wind gust. But yeah, so we were just in like Marlette Lake Campground is just like really nice.
Pretty chill.
Lots of human amenities.
Yeah.
Enough shelter that your tent doesn't blow away.
Yeah. And I will say I was just a little bitter when someone says I can't camp in like perfectly good forested land. So the whole day as we were like hiking there, I'd be like, I could camp there. There's 350 campsites that I could see right here. An army could camp there. Everything's so good for camping. But then it is true that when I got to the campground, I was like, this is kind of nice.
And we met maybe 2 people that were day hiking. Yeah. And then when we got to the so like 2 people the entire day. And then when we got to the
entire 3.5 hours.
Yeah, 3.5 hour day. There was a person with a tent pitch, and so we didn't say hi to the person because it was pretty late and we wanted to eat our Subways and set up our tent and lay in our tent and sleep. But there was one person, so we were kind of curious, like, oh, is this person also on the Tahoe Rim Trail or what are they up to?
Yeah. Well, I wonder if we'll find out.
Oh, gosh.
We hope you enjoyed another episode. Finally. So thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Two Sisters on Adventures podcast. If you want to see any pictures or videos from this week's episode, you can follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Two Sisters on Adventures with the number 2.